Let's go. The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2F and House Rule 11, the chair announces that roll call votes will be postponed until 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. And just a note to my colleagues, because of a number of committee hearings going on simultaneously, this seems to be the fairest way for everyone to be able to cast their votes. Today, we'll consider H.R. 2988, DOE and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act, H.R. 2980, the DOE and NSF Interagency Research Act, and H.R. 3559, the Federal Aviation Administration Research and Development Act of 2023. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Thank you all for joining us at this markup. We have three important bills up for consideration today. First up are two bills that will authorize critical research partnerships with the Department of Energy. We held a hearing in March to discuss how to leverage DOE's tremendous ability to address research challenges faced by other federal agencies. DOE is home to 17 national laboratories that lead the world in research and development work. They also operate 28 user facilities, which give scientists access to cutting-edge equipment and computing power. These resources make DOE uniquely positioned to perform complex and cross-cutting research. This committee has also passed two DOE partnerships bills, one with NOAA and another with the USDA. Today we'll consider bills to enhance DOE's partnership with NASA and the National Science Foundation. H.R. 2988, the DOE and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act, will improve interagency coordination between the Department of Energy and NASA. These agencies have a long history of collaboration, which powers rovers on Mars and has fueled the Voyager spacecraft since 1977. DOE and NASA are doing exciting work on nuclear energy, which will be critical to our ability to establish a long-term human presence on the moon. The results of this research on nuclear technology can be used here on Earth too, helping us to improve this clean and reliable energy source. Today's bill will codify this partnership and ensure DOE and NASA continue to collaborate on this groundbreaking research. I'd like to thank our Energy Subcommittee Chairman, Brandon Williams, for sponsoring this bill, and Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee Ranking Member, Eric Sorensen, for co-sponsoring this bill. Next up, we'll have H.R. 2980, the DOE NSF Interagency Research Act. This bill supports DOE's long-standing partnership with the National Science Foundation, which allows the two agencies to tackle a wide range of complex research challenges. Time and again, this committee has heard the importance of staying ahead of our adversaries, like the Chinese Communist Party, on innovation technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum information sciences, and advanced manufacturing. This bill helps us do just that. By authorizing this collaboration, we're ensuring that we're making the best use of our investments in these advanced technologies. And I'd like to thank our Research and Technology Subcommittee Ranking Member Haley Stevens for sponsoring this and Representative Jim Baird for co-sponsoring it. The last bill we'll consider today is particularly timely given the action on the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization this week. Sometimes this fact might get overlooked, but the Science Committee has jurisdiction over a wide range of FAA research and development activities. Traditionally, the R&D bill we pass out of this committee informs the broader FAA reauthorization process. I expect that to be the case again this year. When we held our legislative hearing on this topic in March, we heard about FAA's work to develop technologies that make air travel cleaner, more efficient, and safer. And we learned what we as policymakers can do to support that work and provide forward-looking direction. This bill reflects the input we got at that hearing, as well as industry and stakeholder feedback. It's the product of extensive bipartisan negotiations to find a consensus that promotes innovation while prioritizing safety. The result is a comprehensive bill to modernize and improve American aviation. It quite literally supports aviation from the ground up, beginning with the durability of our runways and the identification of ground hazards at airfields. It accelerates the development of advanced materials for aerospace vehicle construction and supports research into cleaner aviation fuels, including hydrogen and alternatives to leaded gasoline. It directs FAA to research better air traffic control systems, including how we monitor traffic over oceans and remote areas. It addresses one of my favorite topics, weather forecasting, and how we can more accurately detect and predict weather to reduce delays and increase safety. And importantly, it ensures that safety continues to be the primary focus of FAA research and development by requiring a report on whether at least 70% of FAA's research funds, R&D I should say, funds, are going towards improving safety. I believe we put together a solid framework to support FAA's research work and one that is appropriately tailored to FAA's jurisdiction and strengths. And I'm confident this will be a valuable contribution to the overall FAA authorization. With that, I yield to the gentlewoman from California for her opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lucas. And as you've mentioned today, the Science Committee is going to mark up 3 good bipartisan bills. 2 of these bills will codify already fruitful interagency partnerships and provide additional authorities to strengthen collaborative research and development between NASA and DOE and between NSF and DOE. The 3rd bill, which the committee has been working very diligently on over the last several weeks, will direct our federal research enterprise towards improving civil aviation in many ways. First on the roster is H.R. 2988, the DOE and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act. From earth science modeling to advances in space propulsion, DOE and NASA are well suited to enhance each other's missions and to support significant technological advances. This bill will ensure a productive collaboration by matching the needs with the capabilities of each respective partnering agency. Next, we will consider 2980, the DOE and NSF Interagency Research Act. Both agencies are hard at work implementing the CHIPS and Science Act from their investments in fundamental and discovery research that is foundational to our nation's innovation to their support for emerging technologies and place-based innovation. Across the innovation spectrum, from astronomy to quantum to battery technologies, there's a long list of R&D areas in which these 2 agencies successfully collaborate. This bill will secure this relationship so that we can continue to benefit from their partnership. H.R. 3559, the FAA Research and Development Act of 2023, addresses the research needs of today's aviation community and will support advancements in safety, communication, material science, manufacturing, fuel efficiency, and environmental justice. As you all know, this bill was supposed to be considered in our markup in May, but due to serious concerns raised late by one of the stakeholders, the bill was pulled from the roster. These concerns have since been addressed to everyone's satisfaction, and I want to extend to the chairman and his staff my earnest appreciation for their willingness to work with my staff to address these changes. I plan to support this bill and the amendments that my colleagues have offered to perfect it. I look forward to joining the chairman for advocating for our priorities to be included in the overall authorization of the Federal Aviation Administration that's currently being considered by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. And with that, I look forward to getting started, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Other members are invited to submit their opening statements into the record. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 2988, the DOE and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 2988, to provide for Department of Energy and National Aeronautics and Space Administration research and development coordination and for other purposes. Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Mr. Sorensen to speak on the underlying bill.
Thank you, Chairman. As ranking member of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, I was thrilled to help introduce H.R. 2988, the DOE and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act, with my colleague and chairman of the Energy Subcommittee, Mr. Williams. NASA and the Department of Energy have enjoyed a decades-long successful partnership that has improved our understanding of the universe itself. This bill seeks to build and expand upon the legacy by advancing NASA and DOE coordination on fundamental and applied science. The collaborative research and development efforts this bill facilitates stand to have profound and real-world impacts for my constituents and for all of ours. As a meteorologist, I know the improvements in climate modeling increase our understanding of our changing planet and help us develop science-based approaches to climate mitigation and resilience. These improvements are supported by interagency collaboration. But most importantly, when we enable and support collaboration in discovery and innovation, we help inspire a generation of future scientists and engineers. The children today will become the first adults to walk on Mars. They will rely on capabilities made possible by the technology that we are developing today. I urge my fellow committee members to support this good bill. And thank you, Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the underlying bill?
Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I move to strike the last word and voice my support for this important legislation, H.R. 2988, introduced by my friend and colleague, Mr. Sorensen, the ranking member of the committee, alongside the subcommittee chair, Brandon Williams. Something that we're learning in budget season is about efficiency. You know, we hear our other side of the aisle talk about streamlining government, dealing with waste, and what we are saying as we go through the authorizing and appropriating process and here in this committee with this legislation is that we're going to take two great scientific research enterprises, agencies, the Department of Energy and NASA, and compel them to work together on supercomputers, on climate science, on high energy physics, solving the challenges of today and tomorrow. And we know that these agencies exist in different areas, right? We've got one that's on Pennsylvania Avenue with the Department of Energy. NASA's got a small outpost over here, and then they're in the surrounding Washington area. So their researchers need to have a path to come together physically. They need to have a path and a compelling reason, of which your legislation, Mr. Sorensen, is doing, to say that we're going to work together. And so I salute this committee for this bipartisan legislation, and I full-heartedly endorse it and encourage its passage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady yields back. Is there any further discussion on the base bill? Seeing none, we will proceed with amendments in the order listed on the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen. The clerk will read report Mullen Amendment 8.
Amendment to H.R. 2988, offered by Mr. Mullen of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am presenting my amendment, which would add space-based solar power, yes, that is a thing, as one of the focus areas in which research and development activities may be undertaken together by DOE and NASA. Although the technology to gather solar energy in space and send it to the surface as electricity is not yet commercially viable at scale, we already know from early research that it is possible. Our friends in the UK and Japan have signaled their interest. The China Academy of Space Technology has been researching this area for more than a decade. And last year, the European Space Agency worked with Airbus to successfully demonstrate the technology at work. Here at home, among others, the California Institute of Technology recently launched its own experiment to demonstrate the concept. A lot of the technology that once made this source of energy the work of science fiction is now much cheaper and easier to deploy than ever, putting it within reach. But it's not inevitable that this promising research will become feasible at scale. There are still science and engineering hurdles to overcome, and if the United States doesn't do it, we know our friends and global competitors will. That's why I believe asking Department of Energy and NASA to coordinate in this area of R&D makes sense. I thank my colleagues for considering the inclusion of this amendment.
The gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Seeing no further request for time to speak on the amendment, hearing none, I should say, the question is on agreeing to Mullen Amendment Number 8. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed to have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the Bonamici Amendment number 48.
Amendment to H.R. 2988 offered by Ms. Bonamici of Oregon.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I have a foster youth shadowing with me today, so I want to welcome Samantha to the Capitol and to the Science Committee markup. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Lofgren, my amendment to the Department of Energy and NASA Interagency Research Coordination Act would encourage the development of clean energy technologies and underscore the importance of promoting marine energy. As we transition to a clean energy economy, we have the opportunity to harness the power of the ocean, waves, tides, and currents to help mitigate the climate crisis. The Department of Energy and NASA have a collaborative history of leveraging marine energy to enhance ocean modeling, expand community research, and improve safety. In 2013, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, developed the Wave Energy Converter Simulator, or WECSIM, to help researchers model the unpredictable movements of the ocean. To improve the program's precision, the Department of Energy partnered with NASA's Tournament Lab to host the 2014 Open Source Wave Analysis and Response Program Challenge. This crowdsourced competition improved WECSIM's modeling capabilities and successfully brought together universities and research facilities to invest in marine energy innovation. NASA recently identified WECSIM as a tool to improve safety for the Artemis astronauts and to streamline their mission efficiency. By providing accurate ocean modeling, WECSIM will help NASA researchers land the Orion crew module upright in the water, protecting the Artemis crew, preventing submerged communication equipment, and speeding up recovery. This type of focused collaboration between NASA and the Department of Energy fuels competitive research and also equips scientists with tools they need in advanced energy technology. My amendment encourages further investigation of opportunities to leverage marine energy and unlock its potential to advance missions at NASA and the Department of Energy, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support this important amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to the Bonamici Amendment number 48. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it. The amendment is agreed to. There were no other amendments pre-filed for this bill. Does any member wish to offer an amendment at this time? Hearing none, pursuant to Committee Rule 2F and House Rule 11, further proceedings on this bill will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 2980, the DOE and NSF Interagency Research Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 2980, to provide the Department of Energy and National Science Foundation research and development coordination and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Ms. Stevens to speak on the underlying bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for considering the bipartisan Department of Energy and NSF Interagency Research Act that I am so delighted to have introduced alongside my friend and former Science Committee member, Dr. Jim Baird. Mr. Baird and I passed a piece of legislation in the 116th Congress on STEM education, the Building Blocks of STEM Act. It was signed into law and by the President on Christmas Eve of 2019. And it's a very good reminder of what is possible on this committee. The bill at hand, H.R. 2980, authorizes collaborative research between the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation in areas critical to our national competitiveness. And we all know that in this session of Congress, the 118th Congress, we have the Select Committee on Competitiveness with the Chinese Communist Party. And this is part of the mission of that work, to say that the United States will continue to be a technological giant, an innovation giant, that we do it from the bottom up, we do it inclusively, we do it equitably, and we are building on the long-standing partnership between two agencies, the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation. Again, agencies that don't sit right next to one another, right? The researchers don't have a physical reason to be together. And yet we are collaborating, we are authorizing, and we are compelling these agencies to work together on quantum science, on artificial intelligence, on fusion energy, and advanced manufacturing, investing in regional economies, making things in America, not just because we're saying that, because we are ensuring that the production takes place. We're spending a lot of money in these agencies. Let's make sure that they're coming together for the best results, for a diverse STEM workforce. Let's promote secure data information transfer and capabilities that both agencies can develop through a shared agile data ecosystem. Lots of emerging technologies taking place. We know this. We heard from our NIST witness just a few weeks ago. 27 out of 34 critical research technologies the CCP's ahead in, right? We want to make sure that the United States has leadership and ownership across democracy, Western allied relationships are certainly a part of that, open societies, freedom and fairness, and human rights. So as we've heard in our hearing on these kinds of partnerships back in March, both the NSF and DOE have an extensive history of joint activities, such as support for the development of the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which is a world-class tool for scientific discovery and astronomy. The DOE and NSF Interagency Research Act strengthens the legislative foundation of chips and science, again, another cornerstone of this committee. And I am sitting here next to the former subcommittee chair of the Energy Subcommittee here on Science. He's got a couple of great amendments contributing to the outcome of this legislation. I encourage my colleagues, for the sake of industrial America, for the sake of competitiveness, for the sake of jobs, to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak on the underlying bill. As we heard earlier this year at a hearing on the U.S. Department of Energy's interagency research partnerships, there's an urgent need for legislation to ensure that federal agencies can continue collaborating on strategic research that will enhance U.S. competitiveness and economic prosperity for the next generation. I support H.R. 2980, which was developed in a bipartisan manner. This legislation formalizes a long-standing partnership between the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation, and I thank Congresswoman Stevens and Congressman Baird for their efforts to make this possible, and with that, I yield back the balance. Does any other member wish to be recognized on the underlying bill? If there's no further discussion on the bill, we will proceed with amendments in the order listed on the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bowman. The clerk shall report Bowman Amendment Number 16.
Amendment to H.R. 2980, offered by Mr. Bowman of New York.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from New York is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Representatives Stevens and Baird for introducing this incredibly important piece of legislation. The Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation are both vitally important organizations that operate at the cutting edge of technology, science, and infrastructure. I expect their work together to continue to be transformational for our country and the world. The ability to research and develop innovative climate and energy solutions is imperative for our collective future. Algorithms are routinely deployed in these fields, from climate modeling to grid infrastructure. This bill covers the software layer of these algorithms very well, but there's an opportunity here to cover the full stack of computing. That software is running on top of computer resources, storage, and networking, and all that has important implications for emissions reduction. Innovating across this full stack can provide more space for improvement and impact throughout the system. My amendment will ensure that the DOE and NSF are able to take a holistic approach to partnering on these issues. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
The ranking member's recognized for 5 minutes.
strike light Lord, I just want to thank Mr. Bowman for this excellent amendment. We heard just this week on the fusion hearing about some of the challenges from actually chips and networking, and this amendment does address that. I think it's very important and may help boost our efforts for fusion energy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Further discussion? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to the Bowman Amendment Number 16. All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bowman. The clerk shall report Bowman Amendment Number 17.
Amendment to H.R. 2980, offered by Mr. Bowman of New York.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from New York is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned earlier, the work that the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation are conducting together is transformational for our country. Along with our focus on research and development in this bill, we must also focus on equipping our students, educators, and researchers with the right tools to be successful, and this is obviously very personal for me after spending 20 years in public schools. Our students need opportunities for internships, fellowships, and work-based learning in the industries of not just today, but tomorrow. They also need relevant educational programming that taps into their imaginations and makes complex subjects tangible. This is only possible if educators and researchers have opportunities for professional development that provide a clear pathway for growth. I can't tell you how much I was yearning for this professional development as a teacher, counselor, and middle school principal throughout my career. My amendment aims to ensure that this collaboration between the Department of Energy and National Science Foundation contributes to a future in which all students are empowered. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would just like to thank Mr. Bowman for this amendment. You know, this committee has diverse backgrounds. We're enriched because of it. And because of Mr. Bowman's expertise in education, we have this wonderful amendment. So I urge its adoption and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Further discussion? Seeing none? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to the Bowman Amendment Number 17. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. There were no other amendments pre-filed for this bill. Does any member wish to offer an amendment at this time? Hearing none, pursuant to Rule 2F and Committee Rule 2F and House Rule 11, further proceedings on this bill will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 3559, the Federal Aviation Administration Research and Development Act of 2023. The clerk will report the bill.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Lucas of Oklahoma.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member wish to be recognized to speak on the underlying bill? If there's no discussion on the underlying bill, we'll proceed with amendment. Oh, sorry. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am incredibly proud that the Science, Space, and Technology Committee has put together for the research and development title of our FAA reauthorization package. I currently serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with a few of us here on both sides of the aisle. And in both of our committees, we've done the work that our constituents sent us to do. We've crafted, debated, and are passing bipartisan legislation that advances aircraft safety, facilitates American research and innovation, and puts us on the path to succeed for years to come. I want to briefly associate myself with my colleague from Florida, Mr. Babin. In our markup yesterday in Transportation Committee, he was doing his part to protect our committee's jurisdiction from the strong hand of our transportation and infrastructure colleagues. I certainly do enjoy my time on the other committee that I'm honored to serve on, and this is not a comment to denigrate the work there, but certainly it is important to keep appropriate topics in appropriate committees. And talking about commercial space flight in this committee versus transportation and infrastructure, I believe is appropriate. So to Mr. Babin and my colleagues today, I hope that we can continue our work to protect this committee's jurisdiction, and I look forward to working with you all to ensure that we win our jurisdictional fight on this matter. Maybe it doesn't have to be elevated to a fight. Mr. Chairman, I know that there is a split between the Transportation Committee's portion of the bill and ours, but I want to express again my appreciation that the language that I advocated for pertaining to remote tower technologies were included in this bipartisan bill. My home state of Ohio is currently developing a remote tower program that will provide a platform for a variety of innovative programs and functions. Working in partnership with Ohio-based universities, the State Economic Development Agency, and other stakeholders, the Ohio Remote Tower Initiative will allow for the development of a comprehensive plan to support the research, testing, and development of advanced air mobility applications. It has the potential to change how people travel from small communities, how healthcare services can be delivered, to offer sustainable modes of transportation that will help reduce the carbon footprint of aviation sector. I'm proud of this work that this committee is doing for the future of advanced air mobility and in securing research investments necessary to secure the safe and expedient integration of unpersoned aerial systems and other critical technologies that will benefit my state as well as the entire nation. And before I yield back, I want to ensure that we are continuing to do our part to tap into the incredible potential and diverse pool of American talent that exists in our communities. They are located at HBCUs, at our minority-serving institutions, community colleges, and tribal colleges, as well as our rural and urban communities. As we continue to focus our efforts on fostering American innovation, it is my hope that we in this committee continue to do our part to ensure that the next generation of American scientists, engineers, PhDs, and technicians will represent our communities and our country more equitably than they currently do at the moment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and before the chair turns to the gentlewoman from Michigan, I would note that I've always been a fan of Congressman Babin, and you clearly are now on the list too. With that, the gentlelady from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
You can count one more as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I move to strike the last word on this incredible piece of legislation, H.R. 3559, the FAA research and development effort. I'm really proud that this committee, the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, has this jurisdiction for the R&D efforts of the FAA, in particular the reauthorization that we are going through as a Congress. And I'd like to associate myself, in addition to her fandom of Mr. Babin, I'd like to associate myself with the comments of the great Congresswoman from Ohio, Ms. Sykes, given the role that we are going to play as a subcommittee and as a committee overall on the FAA reauth, as R&D is critical to FAA's success. The industry's changing. The demands are clear: climate change, sustainability efforts, safety, and our ranking member, Ms. Lofgren, as she mentioned in her opening remarks and showed through her leadership alongside our chair, Mr. Lucas, we were in a little bit of a squirm with this one, all right? I mean, we were thinking we were going to come in for a markup. We had a last-minute stakeholder uproar. We had to navigate that, and yet we come back to the table come back to the committee room, bipartisan, R&D efforts, research and development for the FAA, saying we're going to get this done. And so I'm proud of that work. I'm proud to support this bill, and I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you so much.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there any further discussion on the underlying bill? As seeing none, we shall proceed with amendments in the order list. The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Lofgren, for holding this markup on the Federal Aviation Research and Development Act of 2023. The FAA plays a critical role in ensuring the safety of our skyways through managing our nation's airspace and implementing critical safety regulations on pilots, airplanes, and airlines. Tragically, 14 years ago, Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed in Clarence Center, New York, which is right outside my district in Western New York. This crash killed all 49 passengers and crew, as well as one individual on the ground. As a result, Congress and the FAA played and implemented important safety standard updates, including raising the minimum pilot training requirement to 1,500 hours of flight time in an aircraft. By almost every measure, this change has been a success, with U.S. commercial air travel deaths plummeting since enactment. However, just last week, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee decided to roll back this accomplishment in their portion of the FAA reauthorization, allowing just 150 hours of the 1,500 training hours to be completed virtually in Flight Simulator. This is a concerning development that risks rolling back the progress we've made. Passengers want their pilot to have practical experience, not theoretical experience. It's important that they've been proven to master the details and unexpected events that cannot realistically be replicated in a simulator. I hope that as the legislative process moves forward, this dangerous provision is struck. I also welcome my colleagues to join me in fighting to preserve the 1,500-hour flight experience requirement and imposing any efforts to reduce this key safety provision. Thank you again to the Chair and Ranking Member for your work on this research and development portion of the FAA reauthorization. I'm honored to support the passage of this bill, which will ensure continued U.S. aerospace leadership for years to come. And thank you again for all of your efforts and all my colleagues. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the underlying bill? Seeing none, we shall proceed with amendments in the order listed on the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment in the nature of a substitute that was noticed on Friday and offered by myself. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Lucas of Oklahoma.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and I recognize myself to explain the amendment. This amendment in the nature of a substitute was developed in a bipartisan fashion with the intent of tweaking the legislation to develop a strong final product. As I said in my opening remarks, I believe we've come to a consensus that drives innovation research at FAA to improve American aviation. And I'm eager to pass this out of committee to help Congress move forward with a comprehensive FAA authorization. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time, and I recognize Ms. Lofgren to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment in the nature of a substitute reflects extensive discussions and negotiations, and I want to thank you, Chairman Lucas, for working with me and my staff so collaboratively to get an ANS that members on both sides of the aisle can support. The amendment in the nature of a substitute authorizes appropriations for FAA research and development activities for fiscal year 2024 through 2028 and matches the President's budget request for FAA R&D for 2024 with modest increases for the subsequent years in the bill. I'm pleased the amendment includes a section on aviation fuel research, development, and usage to develop a coordinated research and development roadmap to safely eliminate the use of leaded aviation fuel from existing and future piston engine aircraft. I believe this is the only part of our transportation sector that continues to use leaded fuel, and it's especially important to people who are living near general aviation airports who are exposed to the toxic and harmful effects of lead. I'm especially thankful for the majority's collaboration to include language requiring the roadmap to consider the feasibility of widespread use of lead-free aviation fuel fuel not later than 2028, 2 years earlier than the existing goal. The amendment includes provisions on research and development to improve aircraft fuel efficiency, lower aviation emissions, and reduce aviation noise, and directs the development of a strategy on the feasibility, opportunities, and challenges toward the potential use of hydrogen in aviation. The amendment also directs research and development on advancing aviation structures, materials, and manufacturing, and it directs several research and development activities that will contribute to the safety of air travel, including research, modeling, and technologies that have the potential to detect and predict weather impacts to aviation. I'm also pleased that the committee has continued in this amendment to take a strong position on research and development related to electromagnetic spectrum use, in this case for civil aviation and related public safety. The amendment requires research to understand the effectiveness of measures to identify risks, protect and mitigate against spectrum interference and bands used in civil and commercial aviation operations. Regarding changes from the original introduced version, the ANS reflects concerted bipartisan work to strengthen and improve the underlying text, including in the section on aviation fuel research mentioned earlier. The U.S. has a strong record of aviation safety, and FAA research and development is important to sustaining that record of success and to preparing for the safe integration of new and innovative aviation systems into the national airspace system. I want to thank the chairman and his staff for their bipartisan collaboration. I support the amendment and yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? If there's no further discussion on this amendment, and since it is an amendment in the nature of a substitute, we shall move to consider the next amendment on the roster. And the next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey. The clerk will read Posey Amendment Number 34.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Posey of Florida.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from Florida is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will simply ensure that pilot operators and engine safety are included concerning unleaded aviation gasoline research.
Gentleman, yield back.
Yield back.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I just want to note that I support this amendment. It makes good sense to include these entities in the discussion, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the Posey amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to the Posey Amendment Number 34. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen. The clerk shall report Mullen Amendment Number 4.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Mullen of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I am presenting my amendment, which would include the consideration of risk mitigation measures in the bill's existing hydrogen aviation R&D strategy requirement. I want to thank the chairman and committee majority for their commitment to the development of safe hydrogen aviation technology. Aviation currently accounts for 3.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We can and must work to encourage the innovation that will help us greatly reduce the aviation industry's carbon footprint with safety and risk mitigation at the forefront. Through research and development of hydrogen fuel and other alternatives to aviation fuel, we can achieve a sustainable future for aviation. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes himself. This amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen, strengthens research on safe storage, safe utilization, and safe refueling of hydrogen propulsion. This amendment builds on existing language in the bill, and I look forward to supporting this amendment. I support the amendment, and I yield back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to the Mullen Amendment Number 4. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen. The clerk will report Mullen Amendment Number 5.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Mullen of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And finally, my amendment to require the administrator to report to Congress on the impacts of future electrified advanced air mobility on the electrical grid. Our best and brightest innovators across the country, including many in my district, are working diligently to develop the electrified aviation technology of the future. Let's match their efforts by ensuring that when this technology is available and viable, our nation's electrical grid is best equipped to support it. That starts with getting a handle on grid resiliency and capabilities, including the challenges and opportunities around clean electricity generation. This reporting requirement would do just that, and I encourage my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes on the amendment. This amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen, would simply require a study on grid resilience to support future advanced air mobility deployment. I intend to support that amendment, and with that, I yield back. Does anyone else wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to Mullen Amendment Number 5. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen. The clerk will report Sorensen Amendment Number 10.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559.
Without objection, the amendment is considered read, and the gentleman from Illinois is recognized to explain the amendment.
Before I discuss the amendment, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's markup. I appreciate the subcommittee and committee's role in authorizing the research and development activities of the FAA. And I'm pleased we have been able to engage in hearings to explore the issues of both bills under consideration today. We've learned at those hearings that the safe integration of unmanned aircraft systems and advanced air mobility into the national airspace system is essential to our nation's future in aviation, to our economy, our leadership, and to potential benefits to society that these aircraft offer. We also know that addressing weather and its impacts on aircraft is part of ensuring the safety of their operations and of the national airspace system. Unmanned aircraft systems and advanced air mobility are anticipated to react differently to weather than traditional airplanes, whether that's in response to turbulence, icing, or even thunderstorms. It's important that the FAA understand those differences. My amendment ensures that the Aviation Weather Technology Review being directed in this bill includes consideration of UAS and AAM. Understanding research, modeling, and technology to more accurately predict weather impacts will facilitate the goal of safe and successful operations in the national airspace system. I urge my colleagues to support this simple, pragmatic amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. I support this addition and will support the amendment, and I yield back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to the Sorensen Amendment Number 10. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte. The clerk will report Obernolte Amendment Number 28.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As chairman of the Advanced Air Mobility Caucus, I am honored to offer this simple amendment to the FAA research bill. This would direct the FAA to study the economic benefits of using existing airport infrastructure for advanced air mobility aircraft. This is a simple change that would meaningfully help this industry to get off the ground, literally, and to help it make the revolutionary changes to mobility and personal transportation that it's capable of making. I'd respectfully request your support. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the gentleman from my home state of California, Mr. Olbernerty, for his amendment. He has described it, so I will not repeat that, but I do appreciate the gentleman's interest in enabling a future AAM sector, including his bipartisan leadership in this Congress, along with another California colleague, Mr. Panetta, of the Congressional AAM Caucus. I support this amendment and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Are there others wishing to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to Obernolte Amendment Number 28. All in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte. The clerk will report Obernolte Amendment Number 29.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Obernolte of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is another very simple amendment that will facilitate the development of vertiports to support advanced air mobility infrastructure. Vertiports are infrastructure that are unique and different from conventional airports, but still certainly fit into the national air transportation system. The development of vertiports is going to greatly aid this industry in realizing its potential to change the way that we move from place to place, and I would respectfully request its inclusion. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there anyone, the gentlelady from the ranking member wishes to be recognized for 5 minutes?
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, again, I want to thank the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, for his amendment. Once again, it shows his commitment to the AAM sector so that we will have necessary infrastructure. I support the amendment and yield back.
Do any other members wish to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to Obernolte Amendment Number 29. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey. The clerk will report Posey Amendment Number 35.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Posey of
Without
Florida.
objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from Florida is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will require a report to include an examination of China's domestic application of artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I believe the ranking member wishes to be recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do thank the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, for this amendment. I share the commitment to ensuring U.S. competitiveness in R&D and our continued global leadership in aviation. It's important to be fully informed about how our competitors and adversaries, including and perhaps especially China, are applying emerging capabilities like artificial intelligence and machine learning to key economic sectors like aviation. I do think that the FAA, in conducting this evaluation of China's application of artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies to airport operations, would likely benefit from the expertise and access of national security and intelligence agencies, and I don't think we need to add that to the amendment for that direction to occur. I support the amendment and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. I, too, support Mr. Posey's amendment, and with that, I yield back. Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to the Posey Amendment Number 35. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Williams. The clerk shall report Williams Amendment Number 19.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Mr. Williams of New York.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from New York is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to apologize, Mr. Chairman, for my delinquentness this morning. It was a systemic failure.
We live in a
My own.
complicated world schedule-wise. Absolutely understood.
Well, in this case, I'm afraid I'm at fault, so I apologize. Nature has given us this wonderful thing called spectrum. Often we think of it as light, but we know that light goes from the visible light that we see around us down into lower frequencies like the ones that our cell phones operate on, down to FM radio, down to AM radio, and so on. But this is a limited resource. Nature is not going to make any more spectrum, to my knowledge. It is an immutable law. And so we have to do the best that we can with what we have, and that is the nature of my amendment to the FAA Research and Development Act of 2023. And it highlights, frankly, some of the great work that's going on in my district. That's the result of public-private partnerships, and I hope that becomes a model for what else can be done in public-private partnerships around the country. Available radio spectrum is becoming crowded as an increasing number of services, both commercial and government, rely on wireless communications to operate. I think that's pretty evident to all of us that we increasingly live in a wireless world. Fortunately, there's a lot of advances in compute capability and software that allow techniques known as dynamic spectrum access that have been extensively researched by the Department of Defense, including DARPA and other agencies, as a way of promoting more efficient methods for sharing this radio spectrum. In other words, getting more out of what's available, including using this for aeronautical radio navigation. This language will promote innovation and raise safety standards across the board, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. With that, I'd like to yield back the balance of my time, sir.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Does anyone, I see the ranking member seeks recognition and is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is important. It's one example of how new and emerging technologies possibly may enable improvements in the prevention of, mitigation of, or resilience to interference that will be addressed through research, engineering, and development. In this case, the amendment addresses the ability to sense the spectrum environment and dynamically change a frequency. And as the gentleman has pointed out, the management of radio frequency spectrum in civil aviation domain is critical. So I support this amendment and yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Are there any others wishing to be heard on this amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to the Williams Amendment number 19. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Miller. The clerk shall report Miller Amendment number 8.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559 offered by Mr. Miller of Ohio.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from Ohio is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. This amendment to H.R. 3559 would ensure the research and development of inspection and quality assurance technologies to be used with products made by additive manufacturing, an innovative process that allows for parts to be designed and built from the inside out with greater flexibility. While there are already additive parts certified by the FAA in flying today, components made using advanced manufacturing methods are often limited by the ability to inspect and ensure quality. This amendment will provide to reverse that trend and expand the practicable capabilities of these parts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, this amendment would ensure that aviation structures, materials, and advanced manufacturing research and development that's supported by this bill also include research related to inspection and quality assurance technologies for use with complex geometries enabled by advanced manufacturing methods. This is important, and I support the amendment and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to speak briefly in favor of the amendment.
Ladies recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to support this amendment. I have in the district I'm honored to represent the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center, which is a collaboration among private industry, including Boeing and others, and higher education, where they work on advanced manufacturing, and they just cut the ribbon on their additive manufacturing education workforce site. So this is a good amendment, and I'm honored to support it.
Gentlelady yields back. Is anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to Miller Amendment Number 8. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Stevens. The clerk will report Stevens Amendment Number 19.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559, offered by Ms. Stevens of Michigan.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you and Ranking Member Lofgren for your commitment to advancing bipartisan legislation that supports the committee's important mission. It is a delight to offer my amendment to FAA Research and Development Act to ensure that the FAA's monitoring and understanding of severe turbulence to better inform the development of measures to mitigate safety impacts on flight crews and the flying public. We are hearing about this in the news over and over. Extreme clear air turbulence coming out of nowhere, injuring passengers and flight crews, is likely caused by changing weather patterns and weather patterns that we would like to get in front of and have the research and development tools to identify. So just to add a little bit of color, turbulence is the top cause of injuries to both passengers and crews, and it costs airlines as much as $500 million per year. And within the last year, there have been several instances of injuries due to turbulence, of which at least 19 required hospitalizations. And these incidences are certainly concerning, and consumers deserve to have safe flying experiences. And we need to have the best information and detection tools available to us. And so the frequency of severe turbulence is, as we know, increasing, and it poses a safety risk. A new study released last week shows that hazardous clear turbulence is up by 55% just from 1979, so over almost the last half century. Further, recent studies have shown that the prevalence of transatlantic wintertime clear air turbulence will increase significantly in all aviation-related strength categories as the climate changes. Instances of the most severe category of turbulence, for example, are estimated to increase by 149% over the next several decades. Scientists and researchers shared their difficulty with calculating past turbulence trends, noting outdated low-resolution data sets and limited coverage, which have hindered previous efforts to calculate past turbulence trends. And this is why the FAA needs better tools and research to address passenger safety amid this emerging threat to the air travel industry. This amendment, would enhance the FAA's monitoring and understanding of severe turbulence to better inform the development of measures to mitigate safety impacts on flight crews and the flying public that may result from severe turbulence. This amendment also establishes processes for comprehensive data collection to record turbulence incidences and ensures that this data is widely available to the scientific research user and stakeholder community. This amendment also supports research and development to understand the impacts of climate change on turbulence and to enhance turbulence forecasts for flight planning for schedule and route planning and long-term projections of severe turbulence. So we should all be concerned about the uptick in the number, frequency, and severity of incidences of turbulence, but we should also be concerned about the lack of available R&D and technology efforts going to detect it. And so, especially in the absence of substantive FAA funding increases and significant scientific innovations capable of advancing and enhancing aviation safety. The economic risk and the personal safety risk is great, and we want to avoid unsafe and potentially catastrophic conditions. So I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to H.R. 3559 so that we can better ensure and protect American safety and wisely anticipate the impact that climate change will have on the everyday lives of Americans. The FAA research we support today means that tomorrow Americans will be able to fly safer. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I believe the ranking member seeks recognition. The chair recognizes the ranking member, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone who flies from California to Washington and back twice a week, I especially appreciate this amendment, and certainly those of us who fly often understand that the turbulence issue is getting worse and worse, and it's that is supported by data. I wanted to thank Chairman Lucas and his staff for working with Ms. Stevens and her staff and our committee staff to come to a bipartisan agreement on the language for this amendment, including providing authority to the FAA administrator. It's yet another example of our efforts to have a bipartisan approach to all of our bills, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes himself as a regular participant in flying across the country, maybe not quite as far as the West Coast every week when we're in session. I support the amendment and encourage my colleagues to do so, and I yield back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to Stevens' Amendment number 19. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici. The clerk will report Bonamici, amendment number 39.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559 offered by Ms. Bonamici of Oregon.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Lofgren. I introduced this amendment to the FAA Research and Development Act to encourage the continuation of research, development, testing, evaluation, and demonstration initiatives of low-carbon alternative fuels, which may include next-generation feedstocks, biofuels, and bio-derived chemicals. Off-road transportation, such as aviation, presents some of the most difficult decarbonization challenges. A significant increase in the use of sustainable aviation fuels, SAF, and the adaptation of innovative aircraft technology to reduce fuel burn is necessary to minimize aviation emissions. It's encouraging that the federal government is taking some steps to address aviation pollution by investing in sustainable aviation fuel infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law and providing some incentives for sustainable aviation fuel in the Inflation Reduction Act. But challenges remain. When it comes to decarbonizing aviation, we need to promote direct investment in research, development, and demonstration to sustainable fuels produced on a large scale and at a competitive price point with conventional fuels. Closing the price gap between SAF and conventional jet fuel is especially difficult given the low price of regular jet fuel, but it's critical to assisting airlines in transitioning to cleaner fuel supply. The FAA is carrying out several successful programs, such as the CLEAN, which is Continuous Lower Energy Emissions and Noise Program, and the Center for Excellence in Alternative Jet Fuels and Environment, or ASCENT. We must continue to help identify new processes and technologies for producing fuels and get them into commercialization. Congress should continue accelerating these research initiatives to advance our sustainability as a country and our competitive goals in aviation, and to meet the goal of 100% sustainable aviation fuel by 2050. So I thank the chairman for his continued bipartisan support in this committee, and I look forward to working with him and Ranking Member Lofgren on this important issue. And I encourage all of my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes himself now for 5 minutes. The amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, directs FAA to continue the existing portfolio of research into low-carbon fuels. I intend to support the amendment, and with that, I yield. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to the Bonamici Amendment number 39. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. They do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next to last amendment on the roster is offered by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey. The clerk will report Posey Amendment Number 36.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559 offered by Mr. Posey of Florida with Mr. Franklin and Mr. Webster.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman from Florida is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment utilizes some language from the Wolf Amendment. Specifically, none of the funds authorized in this act may be used to conduct, research, develop, design, plan, promulgate, implement, or execute a policy, program, or order, or contract of any kind with the Chinese Communist Party or any Chinese-owned entity unless such activities are specifically authorized by a law enacted after the date of this act. I want to thank Congressman Webster and my colleague Congressman Franklin for co-sponsoring this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas. I'll say at the outset that I don't plan to oppose the gentleman from Florida's amendment. It certainly looks like the purpose of his amendment is to prohibit U.S. tax dollars from flowing to the Chinese government, Chinese-owned entities, or the Communist Party, something I think we can all agree to. However, I do want to express a concern over the possibility of unintended consequences in the limitations included. The Chinese market is considered by most aviation industry forecasts to be the single largest prospective international market for commercial jets. U.S. companies like Boeing and General Electric play a very large role there, and I think that's a good thing. I think we want U.S. companies to be selling products abroad, and that benefits our manufacturing base and benefits workers in America. Boeing and GE are in competition with Airbus worldwide, as we know. Presumably, this is a bill focused on research and development, and the prohibition in the gentleman's amendment shouldn't affect any bilateral, multilateral programs or policies that are necessary to ensure continued access to Chinese markets for U.S. industry. But I just wanted to exercise some caution here, given the importance to our domestic industry of continued market access. We reached out to the FAA to see that if they have any implementation concerns with this, but unfortunately we haven't heard back. I certainly intend to support adoption of the gentleman's amendment, but I would just ask the chair and gentleman from Florida to be open to working with us on language if we hear any unintended implementation concerns from the FAA as we move this bill forward. And with that caveat, I support the gentleman's amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes, and the chair very much appreciates the role and responsibility of being in the minority and the ranking member to be the conscience of the body. With that, I support the Posey amendment, and I yield back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Hearing no others, the question is on agreeing to Posey Amendment Number 36. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The next amendment on the roster is offered by the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Lee. The clerk will report Lee Amendment Number 8.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3559 offered by Ms. Lee of Pennsylvania.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In an era marked by rapid technological advancements, we must address the potential consequences of these technologies. It must be assured that they do not exacerbate the proven discrimination of marginalized communities. The amendment I am proposing aims to mandate the administrator of the FAA to assess the ethical implications of AI and machine learning utilization. Aviation, as one of the most dynamic and complex industries, has experienced significant progress in the integration of AI and machine learning. These technologies hold tremendous potential to enhance operational efficiency. However, R&D into the implementation of such technology must be approached with caution to prevent unintentional biases and inequalities. The The National Institute of Standards and Technology has found empirical evidence that the majority of facial recognition algorithms become less accurate for individuals who are not white, middle-aged men. We frequently see Black women like me trigger full body scanners in airports simply because of our hair, the same hair that in other arenas has been called unprofessional or radical or policed. Algorithmic bias is a major concern. These systems heavily rely on the data they're trained on, and if that data is skewed or contains inherent biases, it can lead to discriminatory outcomes. Furthermore, my amendment emphasizes the importance of inclusivity and collaboration. It encourages the administrator to engage with diverse perspectives to assess the potential biases and inequalities associated with AI and ML applications in aviation. By explicitly including this requirement in legislation, we can ensure that the FAA proactively considers the potential risk and challenges associated with these technologies and takes the necessary steps to mitigate them. By doing so, we can ensure that these technologies do not unfairly target specific demographics or perpetuate discrimination, but rather provide equal treatment to all passengers. With this amendment, we could promote fairness, privacy, transportation, and accountability in the use of these technologies. With that said, I have spoken to the chairman, who has assured me that they will work with me to address these concerns on this bill, and recognition that these concerns are not just going to be limited to these bills, but will come up in other bills that we take up in this committee. So for that reason, and working in good faith, I will withdraw the amendment. I do look forward to working with the chairman in the future on this.
And before the gentlelady yields back, would you yield to me for just a moment?
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate and thank the gentlewoman for amendment, and I understand and appreciate how important the topic is to her, and it should be to all of us. As this technology accelerates and expands in use across the country, the world for that matter, it's important that we get it right. I would reinforce the point that I agree with the gentlelady. We need to work together, not just on this particular bill with this concept, but we need to come up with a concept that will work in a variety of places. And you have my word, we'll work together. I thank you for offering and making the case today and withdrawing to help expedite this process, but this has to be addressed. And if I could yield to the ranking member.
I'll just say I want to thank the gentlelady for raising this issue, which is overwhelmingly important, and as she has noticed, not just with the FAA, but the entire emerging field of AI, and it's something we've got to address successfully, and I look forward to working with her and yield back to her, and then she can yield to the chair.
And if the gentlelady yields back, the gentlelady withdraws the amendment, and with that, Lee Amendment number 8 is withdrawn, and with that, there are no other amendments pre-filed for this bill. Does any member wish to offer an amendment at this time? We've gone through all. Okay. Hearing none, there will be a vote on the amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. One more time. There will be a vote on the amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes appear to have it. They do indeed have it, and the amendment is adopted. A roll call pursuant to Committee Rule 2F and House Rule 11, further proceedings on this bill will be postponed. If there is no further discussion, we will reconvene in this room tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. to conduct the postponed roll calls. I believe there will be 3 postponed roll calls. We will move in an expedited fashion. If you can be here at 8:30, we will make sure that you're at your other committee meetings at 9 o'clock and the security briefing at 9:30. With that, the chair stands in recess until 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.